The laugh cut through the chandelier-lit dining room like a shard of glass, sharp and careless, the kind that makes strangers flinch even if they pretend not to hear it. It rose from the corner table where linen was crisp, wine glasses were untouched, and confidence sat heavier than the silverware. In that moment, anyone watching might have wondered what they would do if humiliation were served as casually as dessert, if dignity were weighed against money in a room full of witnesses. Would you swallow it and keep walking, or would something inside you rise up, uninvited and unstoppable? The restaurant stood in the heart of a large American city, one of those historic places where old wealth liked to remind everyone it had always been there. Crystal chandeliers glowed warmly above white tablecloths, and the soft murmur of privilege filled the air. Servers moved carefully between tables, their faces trained into calm professionalism. Among them was a woman named Ruth, her back straight, her steps measured, her eyes holding the quiet exhaustion of someone who had learned to survive by staying invisible. She wore the uniform like armor, not because it protected her from cruelty, but because it reminded her she still had work to do, bills to pay, a mother waiting at home with medicine she could barely afford. Ruth had not always imagined her life this way. Years earlier, she had crossed borders with nothing but a suitcase and a stubborn hope, arriving in the United States with a degree folded between clothes and memories she did not talk about. The war she left behind had taken her father, scattered her siblings, and taught her languages the way some people learned prayers, out of necessity, fear, and the need to be understood before it was too late. In this country, her qualifications meant little without connections, and connections meant time she did not have. So she served tables, learned menus, memorized allergies, and swallowed comments that stung worse than any physical ache. At the corner table sat a man named Michael, famous in the city for his real estate empire and infamous for his appetite for attention. His tailored suit fit him like a second skin, and his laughter came easily, loudly, as if the world were an audience built solely for his amusement. Around him were friends who mirrored his comfort, people who had never needed to wonder if rent would clear or if an accent would close doors before they even opened. When Ruth approached the table, she felt their eyes skim over her, assessing, dismissing, moving on. The comment came without warning, tossed into the air with the ease of someone who had never paid a price for words. It was framed like a joke, something about money and service, and the assumption that she would not understand the language he chose to use. The laugh followed, rich and self-satisfied, and a few uneasy smiles echoed it. Ruth felt the familiar tightening in her chest, that old instinct to retreat inward, to let the moment pass like so many others. But something different stirred this time. A memory of classrooms bombed into rubble, of her mother whispering lessons by candlelight, of promises made to herself in the dark. She stood there, the tray steady in her hands, and the room seemed to hold its breath. You could imagine yourself in her place, heart pounding, mind racing, calculating consequences. Would speaking up cost her job? Would silence cost her something far more precious? The choice hovered between fear and self-respect, and for the first time in a long while, Ruth felt the weight tip. Without raising her voice, without anger, she began to respond, not with defiance but with clarity. She shifted effortlessly from one language to another, addressing the table, the comment, the assumption, each transition smooth and unforced. The words flowed like a river that had been waiting for a crack in the dam, carrying with them years of study, survival, and quiet pride. Heads turned from nearby tables as the atmosphere changed, curiosity replacing indifference, respect slowly pushing aside amusement. Michael's smile faltered. The confidence that had seemed so immovable just moments before wavered as he realized the depth of what stood in front of him. This was not a punchline or a prop, but a woman whose mind held worlds he had never bothered to see. The money in his hand, once a symbol of control, suddenly looked small, almost childish against the gravity of her presence. Ruth finished calmly, her posture unchanged, her eyes steady. She did not ask for an apology or demand recognition. She simply returned to her work, leaving behind a silence heavier than any insult. In that silence, something shifted not only at that table, but in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. Strangers felt a prickle of shame, a surge of admiration, a reminder of how easily we underestimate the people who serve us. The rest of the evening passed differently. Conversations were quieter, laughter more restrained. Michael sat back, his thoughts turning inward in a way they rarely had. He thought of the advantages he had taken for granted, the assumptions he had made without consequence. For the first time, wealth did not feel like a shield, but like a lens that had distorted his view of the world. Days later, Ruth was called into the manager's office, her stomach tight with worry. Instead of reprimand, she found opportunity. Word of her skills had spread, and a regular patron had connections in an international firm looking for exactly what she offered. It was not charity or spectacle, just recognition arriving late but sincere. The path ahead would still be hard, but it was no longer invisible. Michael, too, changed in small, uncomfortable ways. He began to notice the people he once overlooked, to listen more than he spoke, to question the reflexive jokes that had once earned him easy laughter. Growth did not come all at once, and regret lingered, but awareness had cracked something open. If you think about it, moments like these are everywhere, quiet crossroads where kindness or cruelty can define a lifetime. Maybe you have stood where Ruth stood, underestimated and tired, or where Michael stood, powerful and careless. The story asks you to sit with that discomfort, to ask yourself which choice you would make when the room is watching and your heart is on the line. Before the final moments settle, take a second to share in the comments what part of this story stayed with you the most, or whether it reminded you of a moment from your own life. In the end, this was not a story about money or languages, but about seeing and being seen, about the courage to speak when silence is easier, and the humility to listen when pride says you do not have to. If this story truly touched your heart, gently nudged you toward empathy, or reminded you of the power of second chances, consider showing that love by liking, commenting, sharing it with someone who needs it, and subscribing for more stories that matter.